Here on the blood-stained earth beneath Fort York, those alliances helped shape a new Canadian identity. In 1793, when John Graves Simcoe, Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, chose this site, Lake Ontario wasn't so far away. Simcoe named this place, and the fort that guarded its harbor, York, and declared, "I mean to prepare for whatever convulsions may happen in the United States." York was not this land's first name. Toronto comes from the Mohawk word Takaronto, which means where there are trees standing in the water. The First Nations traveled and traded on Lake Ontario and its tributaries for thousands of years before French traders arrived. Trade over these waters powered the growth of York. This place became the capital and the largest city in Upper Canada and was renamed Toronto. When the railways connected Toronto to the continent, the local economy boomed. From the 1850s to the 1930s, Toronto engaged in lakefill projects around Fort York that eventually pushed the shoreline more than 500 meters south of this historic site. And that's why the fort is no longer on the water. Today, it's hard to imagine this modern city hasn't always been at peace. But in the early 1800s, tiny York was on the far frontier of the British Empire, and the new United States wanted Britain out of North America. The Americans raided York in 1813. The fort was destroyed, but was quickly rebuilt, deterring the Americans from attacking when they returned a year later. The War of 1812 would soon be over, but it would be an uneasy peace. The fort was expanded in the 1830s and further in the 1860s, given worries about local rebels and the huge American armies amassed during the U.S. Civil War. In the 1840s, new fortifications were built to the west of Fort York, and the old fort's importance slowly declined. After the Dominion of Canada was created in 1867, Canadian troops assumed full responsibility for the defense of the new nation. When Canada entered the First World War, the old fort became a bustling military site for the last time. Not all of Fort York's battles have been military. The fort was also caught in the crosshairs of the conflict between progress and preservation. Thousands streamed to the Canadian National Exhibition, and the city proposed a new streetcar to the fair, cutting directly through some of the fort's oldest buildings. A local schoolteacher ignited the fight to save Fort York. Jean Geeson's letter to the Globe charged, "Has it been forgotten that this old fort is the cradle from which has sprung our magnificent and life-throbbing city?" Eventually, the streetcar was rerouted along the fort's northern ramparts. In recognition of its value to all Canadians, the federal government made Fort York a National Historic Site in 1923. Restoration work began a decade later. The fort opened as a public museum in 1934 as part of the City of Toronto's centennial celebrations. But the fort was not out of danger yet. By the early 1950s, a rapidly growing Toronto needed superhighways. One proposed road, later called the Gardiner Expressway, was to run through the fort grounds. The regional government solution was to move Fort York's buildings hundreds of meters south. Raising his voice with community activists, journalist Pierre Burton wrote, "In an age of sham and simulation, they will see a sideshow, but they will not see a shrine. Only on these acres do we walk with history." A compromise routed the Gardner Expressway south, around the fort. Fort York survives today as the largest grouping of 1812-era military buildings in Canada. From these grounds, thousands of artifacts have been recovered, illuminating our past, reminding us of those who fought here over 200 years ago. Fort York was attacked by American forces, by water and by land. The retreating British soldiers blew up their own gunpowder magazine to keep it out of enemy hands. The devastating explosion killed and wounded hundreds. The American troops looted the town of York and burned the Parliament buildings. The American flag flew over York for more than a week. Then the invaders moved on to other targets. The next year, the British would retaliate by burning Washington, D.C. Fort York no longer stands to protect Toronto. It stands to remind us what was lost and won here. It stands to pass the lessons of history to future generations.
Let us remember that it wasn't a quest for peace for all, but the ultimate sacrifice of the fallen was made.
It stands to honor the fallen. Here we remember the sacrifices of those who built this place and this nation. Here we remember how we became Canadians.
1840年、1850年左右的时候的人的生活，军官的制服，还有一件熊的熊皮。都有暖气啊。 种酒窖。
Thank you for being on my tour. Enjoy this day and enjoy your visit to the fort. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Alrighty, yeah. So welcome to the 1826 kitchen. So it's a little bit newer than the rest of the building. So the kitchen is really specific, only for the officers and only their dinner. So dinner was their main meal of the day. Now I'm sure you've heard a bit about what the soldiers were eating. The soldiers were depending completely on what the military provides. The officers often came from like private family money. They were often from wealthier backgrounds. They were used to a certain standard of living. That included their food, and they weren't about to stop living like that just because they happened to be here. So officers, they could draw rations if they wanted to. You know, they're members of the military. They have the right. But by and large, they are paying out of their own resources to have meals more like what they were used to. So think at least 2 to 3 courses for their dinners, with at least 3 to 4 dishes per course. And it gets fancier from there depending on the day. So you're expecting, you know, a lot of meat dishes, things made with sugar and spices and things that would be imported and expensive. And all of that was prepared in here. So think of this as being kind of like a modern restaurant quality kitchen. This is a professional arrangement. It's not really the kind of thing you would find in someone's home. And the officers are paying for this. They're paying for the ingredients, they're paying for the cookware, they're paying the wages of a professional cook, a woman from the town who came in every day to do all the cooking for them. She made not bad money by the standards of the time either, because as you can imagine, this would take quite a bit of skill. The cook would need to know 3 main cooking methods. The most obvious, and the one that you can see going right at the moment, is what's called open hearth, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, cooking on the open fire in the hearth. We've got some little sort of griddle cakes called Derby cakes going on there at the moment. The second method is the hearth itself, so the brick that I'm standing on. That's why the hearth is so big on this fireplace. It's actually a cooking surface. Now, if I wanted to cook with this, I would pull the fire apart, because what you actually want are the embers that are underneath. You would shovel the embers onto the brick. Do not put the embers on the wooden floor. That would be a very poor choice. And then over top of that, you would put your trivet. And then you've basically made a burner, like on a modern stovetop. And a lot of burners actually still have this kind of shape to them. This is still with us. So wherever you see brick, we can do that. Some of the cookware does have the legs already on it. Like this griddle, for example, has legs on it. I personally find they're a bit too short, and you need to use, or at least I need to use a trivet anyway. But I'm totally willing to admit that that is operator error, possibly on my part. And then the third method is our bake oven. So I'm just going to pull the peel out. So that's how far back it goes, approximately where my hand is there. This is wood fueled as well. You make the fire right inside. This one takes 2 to 3 hours-ish, depending on how closely you're watching it, to get up to temperature. Then, rake everything out, then mop it, then your food goes in. So unlike with the hearth, the fire isn't directly cooking anything. It's all the leftover or residual heat in the brick that's doing the work. Ideally, you get 3 to 4, maybe 5 if you're really good at it. I've seen some period cookbooks say a good cook can get 7 fire rings out of an oven. Personally, I think that might be a bit optimistic. I think between 3 and 5.
Depends on the oven.
Yeah.
It's got to be a very efficient one.
Yeah, and a very efficient operator, which is maybe the flaw in the situation is me. But yeah, so you would rake it out, bake everything, and then it would come out. Now we do still use that oven; it's still functioning, just not very often, because as you can imagine, it's a bit of a beast. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of firewood. Speaking from personal experience, raking it out, nobody's favorite job around here. It's really hot, it's really sweaty. The soot and the ash gets everywhere. I've gone home with it in my hair, in my shoes, just nobody's favorite job. What I like to tell people is that anything you can do in your kitchen, we can do here. It just takes us longer because we have to do everything by hand. So you might have noticed my coworker here bringing in, these are Queen's cakes. The leavener in this is eggs, like yolks and whites whisked up. There's no electric mixer here. My coworker did that by hand, which is, like, it's a lot. So anything you can do, we can do. It just takes us longer. It's all got to be done by hand. So officers' foods, in a lot of cases, like I said, sugar, spices, lots of meat, things that are expensive. If you would like to try, and I won't make you, we do have ready to sample, if you would like, as a kind of biscuit, so in the British sense, like a cookie, called a jumble. Now I'm going to read out the list of ingredients because I know for some of us that is important information. We've got butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and in this case, nutmeg. So that's what's in them. However, if anybody here has allergies or intolerances, I can't guarantee no contact with anything. So if you do have a food thing going on, it's probably going to be safer to say no thank you. But otherwise, I'll sort of come along the table. And if you would like to try one, you may. Again, I'm not going to make you. The only other rule is the first one you touch is the one you take. No seeing a better one and putting the first one back. And they're all pretty well the same, I promise. They're all the same size, basically.
It's about the kids.
And so this is what
Yeah, so this is from an 1831 recipe.
Commercial kitchen just behind in the wall, built into the wall. And that's what supports this kitchen. It
So
allows
it's
us
the
to
same
feed.
inside ingredients and everything, but you can do it there.
I had to do it there because we wouldn't have, it would be very hard to do it on a day like today when we're very busy. But I have faith in it. Yeah, so it can do that.
They're already came in with guys we were back in the war. They used to dress up.
Yeah, so these are from an 1831 recipe from a domestic manual called The Cook Not Mad.
So would this be cooked over the hearth?
These would have been done in the oven. We did not. We have a modern kitchen in the back. It's not feasible for us to like this. It's time.
I'm used to it, I guess. I don't notice it. I mean, I notice when I first come in, I notice the smell, but when I get
The down part. It's called the down part. Yeah. So like the open hearth and the down part. It sounds like that.
Red or brown color.
Yeah, so the Cook Not Mad.
like back in the
Domestic manual.
those were the original colors that the officers